All right, I'm live. What's up? I'm live. She get All right, y'all. Here we go. Today I have 8 little known ways our broken property tax system costs you. And here's the thing. What I'm about to go over today is something you're not going to hear anywhere else, and it all has to do with the fact that I'm one of, if not the only person that is exclusively focused on helping single family residential property owners. Just about everybody else, hang tight. There you go. That was going to bug me. Just about everybody else is focused on property rights in general or focused on taxes in general, but I'm focused on single family residential property owners. And in this live event, I'm going to explain why that's my focus. This is this is the group of people that are getting treated the worst out of anybody, and I'm going to explain why, and I'm going to prove it. And there's only a few people watching. People are logging on right now, but I'm going to go ahead and get rolling through this. I'm going to assume more people are going to watch it on the replay. So here's the thing. When the appraisal district filed all the complaints on me and all this stuff went down, I prayed for an opportunity for that to launch me into a position where I could be part of the discussion to talk about and brainstorm what type of property tax reform issues our legislature might consider. So I was a part of a few different groups actually where we were discussing what kind of property tax reform ideas would be good and legitimate and like something that we should consider. And in that group, I was the only person that represented single family residential property tax, residential property owners exclusively. The other people sitting at the table were either folks that represented some arm of the government, whether it's somebody from the comptroller, somebody from the appraisal district, somebody from a taxing entity, or it was a tax attorney. Or it was somebody maybe even from the collection side, the tax assessor's office, or maybe it was somebody that was a property tax consultant that was making money by protesting. So, or it could have been another legislator, which the legislators I view as they should be fairly neutral. They should be the ones on our sides for the most part. But here's a couple issues. The one reason why we have so many problems that are not getting fixed is because it's really, really difficult to get all these people to agree on a consensus on what the solution would be. However, just about everybody that I come across is a homeowner or a renter here in Texas, and we can all agree on the problems. And so, in a nutshell, that's what I'm going to focus on today. But in a nutshell, one of the top problems is that me and you are taxed based on value that we cannot access because it's in our house. And that value, the burden of our tax bill increases at a rate disproportionate from our level of income. So we're taxed on our house, and we cannot access the money that we're being taxed on until we sell our house. And when our income isn't rising at the same rate and we have no desire to sell our house, then this creates a dysfunction in the system. And that's one of the biggest issues in general, is just what is being taxed and how the value of that property is determined. So the value of our property is determined by what other people have bought other properties for recently that are near our house. It has nothing to do with our house. It just has something to do with what other people have paid for other houses recently. And if we have no desire to move, our income isn't going up. This just puts us in a completely unfair position, in my view. This is something where if I started to explain this to people that are inside the property tax system, they might disagree with me, but it's only because they've just gotten accustomed to the rules. They're not sitting there looking at the real life constraints and hardships this puts on people. And so I'm going to go a little bit deeper on this subject, and I'm going to touch on some things that you're not going to hear anywhere else. And so here we go. This issue of I described what we're being taxed on. I described how the valuation process happens, but you need to know that this affects two populations of people more than anybody else. And because of the unfairness in the system, and really it comes back to how the properties are valued. The two groups of people that it affects the most are the lower property value people and the upper property value people. The middle class folks, we're getting hosed right and left. Don't get me wrong, or we're being taxed out the nose. However, the system works fairly well as it is intended. It's just that it's intended all wrong. We need it. That's a different topic that we're going to hit tomorrow. And in fact, we're going to talk about bigger picture issues, legislative issues tomorrow. But the way that the system is designed, it works as it's intended for the middle class folks. And it largely is because there are a lot of property sales in the middle class rung. So when you're dealing with houses in the $300,000, $400,000 price range, you're going to see a lot of property sales. And so the appraisal district can get their hands on a lot of data. And whether that's right or not is a different topic. But when you can get their hands on a lot of data, that means that their values are going to be a lot more accurate for that middle class area than it will be for the upper luxury homes or the lower class. And the reason why it treats the upper class and the lower class so unfair is because of the lack of property sales. The luxury homes just don't resell very often. Same thing for the lower class homes. They don't resell very often. The lower class homes, you've got a number of issues there, but the difference between these two groups, the luxury homes and the lower class homes, is the difference there is that the upper tier of people, they can get the help that they need. They can afford to hire people. The people that provide the help can afford to help them. And so they're big boys, big girls, and they can fight the battle. And so they can figure out how to create a little bit more fairness in the system because of the ability to be able to fight. The folks on the lower end of the spectrum, they can't get the help that they need. And one reason is because the people providing that help, the property tax consultants that make a fee for protesting for people, they can't make a living helping the people on the lower end of the spectrum. There's not enough money in it. So they don't get the marketing materials. They don't get the education. There's a lot that comes when you become valuable. All of a sudden you get a lot of attention. Well, when people on the lower rung are getting ignored, they don't get the attention. That means they don't get the education. That means that they're getting ignored. And a lot of times the message just doesn't get to them. And I'm seeing it firsthand. I go and speak to these communities. I actively target lower property value communities so that I can provide that help, because I'm the only guy that I know of that's going to be able to do that. So that's just a tip of the iceberg. And I'm not going to do a good job numbering these issues. But I'm going to I can keep going on the lower income folks, but first I just kind of want to zoom out for a second and give people watching this and people that don't follow a lot of my videos, I want to give a little bit of a foundational knowledge and information, just 101 level of how our property tax system is set up. And from that, it's going to help us springboard into some bigger picture concepts. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and give you a little bit of a visual, because right now I'm going to talk about some math, and it's going to be a pretty easy math formula to follow, especially if you're accustomed to doing any math. And for the rest of you that are wired a little bit more like me, then you're going to be helped by this visual aid. So give me 1 second. I'm going to share the screen, and it's going to be right here. Okay. So right now we've got a simple math formula. You've probably heard me talk about this. I'm going to just oversimplify it. It's going to be property value times tax rate equals your tax bill. And if you've seen me talk about this, or this is review for you, just hold on for a little bit. I am going to expound on this quite a bit. But this is how your property tax bill is calculated. They take the property value, which is calculated by the appraisal district. They multiply that by the tax rate. The tax rate is determined by the local taxing entities like the schools, the cities, the county. And then the tax bill is sent to your house after calculating that formula. There's a little bit more to it, but that's a simplified version. That gives you what it is in a nutshell. So the property value is determined by the appraisal district. They send the information about what the property value is. They send that over to the tax assessor. The tax assessor sends that out to the taxing entities. So the school board, the city councils, those guys, they get the amount of the property value for their entire area. So let's say Northwest ISD. After the appraisal district does their things, all of the protests in the Northwest ISD area, after all of those have been resolved and they've got certified values, then the entire amount of property value for Northwest ISD will be totaled together and then given to Northwest ISD. The Northwest ISD looks at the entire amount of property value, and then they look at the amount of money that they need to facilitate their budget. And so basically all they do is they look at the property value, then they dream up how much money they want to spend. They pass the budget. And by the way, we can turn this into, instead of tax bill, you can put the word budget. The calculation works exactly the same. So this equation works the same for you personally as it does for the taxing entity as a whole. It's just that instead of the bill, we're using the word budget. So the taxing Northwest ISD will pass their budget. They'll get the total values, and then they'll say, okay, if we need X amount of dollars of revenue, then, and we've got X amount of dollars for property value for the entire area, then what tax rate do we need to charge? And so then that tells them what tax rate they have to charge. So what ends up happening here is if you protest your property tax value and you win, then guess what? It doesn't affect how much money the school district gets. It doesn't affect that at all, because all they have to do, if let's say your property value is reduced, let's say everybody in the whole daggum area, everybody in Northwest ISD, if they protested their value and it cut it in half, then you would just have to raise this a little bit to equal the same amount. And since they get these numbers, the timeline in which they get these numbers allows them to be able to make those adjustments so that they can make sure and get as much money as they need, basically. And so politicians play a lot of games with these figures. They'll come in and say, hey, we didn't raise the tax rate for 3 years in a row. It's like, yeah, ding dongs. The reason why you can say that is because the property value has been going up sky high. If you double this property value, guess what? You don't have to multiply it by a number that's very high at all in order to equal the same amount of money that you're producing. Our tax bills will fulfill whatever budget that is. So that's it in a nutshell. Now, here's what I want to explain, and I just kind of gave it to you in a general sense. But let's just imagine that budget for the taxing entity. Let's just imagine it's a pie. Okay, so you've got a pie here, and then the way it works is every single property value would be one slice, or every single property would be one slice of the pie. And your slice of that pie would be in proportionate to the amount of your property value. Okay. And so all they do is they take the entire budget and they say, okay, out of that budget for the entire taxing entity, we need everybody to pay a certain amount of that budget so we can get so it can fund the entire budget. And the amount of your bill is going to be in proportion to the size of your pie. In other words, the size of your property value. And so all that happens is if your property value shrinks a little bit, then all the others increase. And that's how it works. Well, let's just imagine for a second that, so here's the thing, no matter how much you protest, the taxing entity, the city, the county, they're going to get the same amount of money no matter what. Okay. Now let's just pretend that this is a pie. Let's pretend that there's only two slices on the pie. One is commercial and one is residential. Okay. On the residential side, we all know kind of the process for protesting. Maybe you don't know as much as the next person, but it's a pretty buttoned up process. It makes sense to us. But what happens is the commercial side is it's a completely different process. And the reason why is because of how the properties are valued. So on the residential side, I've already talked about it. Your house is valued according to how much somebody else has paid for other houses around your house. They say that's about what your house is worth, is what somebody's paid for these other houses. Well, on the commercial side, it's different. It's calculated through an income approach. And so the way it works is if you own a skyscraper in downtown Fort Worth and you've got all these office buildings that you can rent out and receive rent from, then your property generates a certain amount of revenue. Well, they just take that revenue and they multiply it by a figure. They call it's technically called a cap rate. And that is what determines the property value. I'm oversimplifying it, but in a nutshell, what it does is it ensures that the value of the property rises and falls in proportion to the amount of income or revenue generated by the property. So the more money the property owner has, the higher the property value goes. The less money the property owner is generating, the lower that property value goes. And so at the same time, the tax bill increases and decreases because the tax bill is calculated based on the property value. And so it's based on the amount of revenue. It's in proportion. It's not dollar for dollar. And it's not a perfect system, but the amount the tax bill the tax bill is in proportion to the amount of revenue. So you don't have this dysfunction where your expenses are increasing at a rate far beyond your ability to pay. Okay. So already commercial has that advantage in the system, kind of baked into the system, is when they have to pay more, they have more money. The same thing doesn't go for residential. Now, here's part of the problem that I have, coming back to the pie analogy. The commercial side of that pie has been shrinking like crazy. And the reason is because the commercial property owners have a huge advantage in the protest process. Instead of going through the normal process like me and you do, all they do is they generate they basically mail in literally mail in the protest, get the necessary documents so that they can just turn around and sue the appraisal district. Well, the laws are written to be fairly property owner friendly in this regard. And so the property owners of commercial properties just sue the appraisal district, and the appraisal district, because of the way the laws are written, the appraisal district would be on the hook for all the legal fees and all of the expenses involved in the lawsuit if the appraisal district loses. Well, the appraisal district can't afford to fight all those in court. They don't have the resources for it, and nor do we want them to have all the resources, because that would cost us an arm and a leg as taxpayers. We just get taxed out the nose so they can fight all these lawsuits. So what they do is they settle all the lawsuits, and what that means is their piece of the pie shrinks considerably. Okay. So if the commercial side is shrinking, that means the residential side is increasing. There's some nuances in the property tax code that are written. By the way, the tax code is written by commercial property tax consulting firms, by and large. Those are the people that are the experts that can give advice to the legislators. And so they have written the tax code to make it possible for them to sue the appraisal district and shrink that size of the pie considerably. Now, what happens is, as the commercial piece of the pie shrinks, the residential increases, but it doesn't work quite like that. The way it works is, let's just imagine you were to take a few chunks of the commercial pie, pieces of the pie out, then they squirt it all over the top of the residential like it's icing on top of that part of the pie. That's basically how it works. Okay. So I actually helped a lady named Jess Harden, who's been an incredible asset and an invaluable resource to taxpayers and me personally, in just helping to increase awareness about what's going on at the appraisal district and what's going on in the property tax system. And she wrote this article back in October of 2022 where it talks about this very issue. While your home value skyrockets, Texas businesses have gotten a break. Who pays? You do. So in this article, she goes on to talk about specific scenarios, and then she kind of hits the broad spectrum here, where we talk about Walmart's 37 Tarrant County stores have over the last 5 years have decreased in value 2.5%. Okay, that's over a 5-year period. They've decreased 2.5%. In the same time period, the median home price of Tarrant County has increased by 51%. So what you're looking at there is the commercial side of that pie shrinking and the residential side of the pie increasing. So to make matters worse, you might look at this issue and say, well, we're a business-friendly state. Of course, commercial property owners are going to get a tax break. I don't have a problem at all with commercial property owners getting a tax break. What I have a problem with is the fact that this information is largely not being talked about anywhere. Our legislators don't want to talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about it because it's taboo, because the people that are making money in the system are the ones that are in our legislators' ears. And I actually don't blame commercial property owners for suing the appraisal district and getting this advantage. I don't think that the problem should rest on their shoulders. In fact, I view it exactly the opposite. I'm a capitalist. I believe that if there is a legal avenue for a company to get a competitive edge, then they probably are pretty stupid if they're not taking advantage of it. In fact, I would say just about any multifamily property owner, commercial property owner should be suing the appraisal district to make sure that they get the minimum value possible by utilizing the legal methods to do so. Now, where I have a problem is with the legislators. The legislators are supposed to be standing up for us. They need to be going to bat, drawing the lines in a certain way to make this kind of stuff illegal, or at least bring it to us so that we can have more of a say in what's going on, at least be informed. And if we as taxpayers decide, hey, you know what? We like our business-friendly state, we like our jobs, and so we want our business owners to get this kind of advantage, and that's an informed decision, then I don't have a problem with it. I honestly don't know how you go about doing all that. All I know is this kind of stuff isn't being talked about at all. One thing that people have a problem with here in Texas is the fact that our appraisal district gets all of our sales data like just at, wholesale. They get the entire database of sales data. And the way they get it is because they subscribe to the MLS, or they'll have a realtor in their office that's getting this information from the MLS. And so they're getting all our sales data and just handing it over to the appraisal district, or the appraisal district can become an affiliate member. They just pay the Association of Realtors for this information. And that seems like it should be illegal. And I would agree with you. I don't have a problem with the appraisal district getting this information, because I think that they need to be doing accurate appraisals, and that gives them the data so that they can have the ability to do accurate appraisals. The problem that I have is that there are laws on the books that say that the government we cannot force people to disclose their sales prices to the government. And so as long as that law is on the book, I got a problem with them figuring out a backdoor technique to get that. I think that we either need to change the laws or they need to not have the sales data. As long as that law is on the book, they shouldn't have the sales data. Okay. As long as they're tasked with doing accurate appraisals, I think they should have the data. So you have a problem here, and it's a disingenuous way of going about doing it. It's something where it should be illegal. But here's the thing. That's on the residential side. And the reason it's that way on the residential side is because 95%-ish of all home sales are sold through a realtor. Realtors are required by law. No, not by law. Realtors are required by the rules of the Association of Realtors to list any house on the MLS and disclose the sales price accurately. We don't have the ability to not disclose the sales price. When we take a listing, we now have to list it on the MLS so that it's available for all the other realtors to look at. I believe that rule is bunk, and it's pretty controversial. Controversial rule has been under scrutiny for quite a while. And I also believe that causes realtors to go against our clients' fiduciary duties. We have a fiduciary duty to our clients, and if our client says, I don't want you to put that house on the MLS, we shouldn't be forced to do it. And even by doing so, what it does is it facilitates this process of disclosing our sales prices to the government, which is illegal. So, but here's the thing. It's not illegal. It should be illegal. It's not illegal because the Association of Realtors is a private organization, and a private organization can do whatever they want with their data. As realtors, we have to sign on to the rules of the MLS, and we don't really have a choice to not cooperate with this. We could not sell homes. We could not be realtors, but if we want to be realtors, you have to sign on. There's no other way to do it. So I think that that's a problem. I've talked to several MLSs and Association of Realtors CEOs of local boards, and a lot of them don't have a problem with it. The folks in Austin have had a big problem with it. They took exception, and now the appraisal district doesn't get the sales data. Now, here's the thing. Reason I bring this up is not because I have a big problem with that. Reason I bring it up is because I have a big problem with the fact that commercial sales are not known to the appraisal district. Commercial sales are not usually listed on the Realtor MLS. They're usually listed through a different service called CoStar. Gosh, dog. Is it CoStar? It's LoopNet. I'm just on the spot, so I can't think of it off the top of my head. CoStar. Yes, I always get it confused with CoSurf. CoStar. So CoStar is a commercial MLS. They don't have the same rules. only about 6% of the sales prices in commercial sales are disclosed accurately. So here's what that means. When the commercial property owners come in and sue the appraisal district has nothing to fight with. And so because they don't have the sales data. Okay. All right. Let me back out. I've talked about this stuff a little bit in the past. I could keep going on this stuff, but what I want to do is just really focus on how our protest system, our property tax system disadvantages the lower class people, because this is something that you haven't heard of anywhere else. And it's a big, big problem. And I'm also going to talk about how our homestead exemptions create another problem for lower income folks. So let's see here. Let me talk about this right off the bat. If you own a house, let's say it's a $200,000 house, and you go to a protest hearing, and you know that there was something unjust that happened in that protest hearing, then your remedy to correct that is to appeal. Well, you only have two real options to appeal a faulty decision at a protest hearing. One is to sue the appraisal district. That's going to cost well over $1,000. The second one would be to file arbitration. Arbitration costs about $500. It costs a $500 deposit. Then if the homeowner is successful, they'll get $450 of that deposit back. Okay. Now, the problem with this is if you have a $200,000 house, and let's say that the decision costs the homeowner $20,000 in property value. Well, that equates to about $450. My math might be a little off, but give me a little grace. That equates to about $450. So if I'm a single family residential property owner that owns a property less than $200,000, it's completely cost prohibitive for me to go in and appeal the decision. It's a screwed up system where it costs you potentially $500 you got to put $500 at risk to see if you can arbitrate this thing. And here's the thing that's even more screwed up. And I know that I'm going to be off by about $50 or $100 or whatever, but if you own a $2 million property, guess what? The cost for you to arbitrate is the same. It's $500. Okay. And so and here's the thing. If you win on an arbitration hearing and you have a luxury home, you might get $200,000 of property value knocked off for putting the same amount of money at risk. It's not an apples to apples thing. It treats the lower class folks, the lower property value folks, in a disproportionately unfair way. I think that the cost associated with arbitration should be proportionate to the property value so that it can facilitate the ability for the lower property value people to file arbitration and appeal a messed up hearing decision. Okay. So that's one thing you probably never heard anywhere else. The other thing that I want to mention is, let's talk about this. I've already talked a little bit about how the lower income folks don't get the same attention because tax consultants can't afford to help them. Let's talk about this really quick. Let's talk about homestead exemptions. Okay, so the homestead exemption that you and I are accustomed to seeing is an exemption that basically reduces the amount of taxable value that we have on a property. Actually, let me back up for a second. There's two main components of a homestead exemption. The one that's required by law. One part of it is to cap the value at 10% growth per year. Okay. The second part of that homestead exemption is to subtract a certain dollar amount from the taxable amount of the house. Let me pop this up for you so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Let's see here. Property tax rates, Tarrant County. Let's see if I can just pull this up really quick. Give me 1 second. I'm pulling this up. Actually, the Tarrant Appraisal District has one of the better charts for this. And so I'm going to pull up theirs and show you exactly what I'm talking about. All right, here we go. So there are two different types of homestead exemptions. There's one that's mandated by law. Every single school district in Texas has to abide by it. They have to offer it. Okay. And so on this chart, if you Googled property tax rates, Tarrant County, then you'll be able to download this from the appraisal district's website. So on this sheet, the first page talks about the city exemptions. Those exemptions are optional. The ones that are mandated by law are on the second sheet, where we talk about the school district exemptions. So for the school district homestead exemption, what they've got is right here. It's state mandated to be a $40,000 reduction right there. The place that you're going to see this $40,000 reduction is not on the appraisal district website. It's on your actual property tax bill. Okay. So again, let me back up for a second and just explain. When your homestead exemption gives you two benefits. One is to cap the amount of the appraised value by 10% per year. Okay, this is the value that you can go you can protest the number that the appraisal district puts out there, and that number is capped at 10% growth per year. I think we all kind of understand that. The other part that you don't probably understand, because it's not right in front of our face quite so much, is that once your tax bill is calculated, they're going to take off an additional $40,000 off the taxable value of your house, and then they calculate your tax bill. You can see that all of these school districts had the same $40,000 reduction across the board. Okay. This is for the homestead exemption. I love this homestead exemption. And the reason is because it is a flat fee. Everybody gets the same exact reduction, no matter what. You all get a $40,000 reduction. Now let's scroll up and look at this. The school districts are required to give that homestead exemption. Now, you can see the state mandated section of this is completely blank for cities and the county. There is no legally required homestead exemption to be given by cities or the county. The local optional exemptions are right here. And you can see it says local option homestead percentage. Right down the road, you can just look at this. There are no flat fees. These are all percentage amounts, okay? So the maximum percent that a taxing entity can provide is a 20% exemption. And this sounds great on the surface. The only problem with this is that daggum pie chart. It's the pie. When you take a percentage reduction, then what happens is, if, let's say, for instance, in White Settlement, if there is a property that's $2 million, this $40,000, or this, I'm sorry, let me back up. If you have, let me just do this real quick. Hold on before I show you something embarrassing. I'm going to do some math and I'm going to show you real quick. I'm going to pop up the math here. All right. So if you take a $2 million property right there, and you take 20% of that, it's going to be $40,000 or $400,000. Sorry. Times 0.2. That's $400,000. Okay. So on a $2 million property, the amount of reduction you're going to get on a 20% exemption equals $400,000 reduction. All right. If you have a $200,000 house, then you're 20%. Oh my gosh, I did the calculator on the wrong screen. Sorry, guys. I figured this would be easier if I just did this in front of your face, and then I put it on the wrong screen. So times 0.2. So if I took a $200,000 property and I took 20% of that, then that equals $40,000. Okay, so here's the problem. Remember earlier when I was talking about the pie? When you have the pie and you shrink and you start removing chunks of property value. So let me just recap for just a second, because there's a lot of people tuning in new, and I want you to get this. The taxing entity creates their budget just like this. Well, the amount that they have to fulfill, their budget, it's divided up by pieces of the pie, and those pieces of the pie are proportionate to your property value. Okay. So your piece of the pie, the amount of money you're going to pay to the local taxing entity, to the local city, is in proportion to your property value. If we start removing chunks of that value, then your piece of the pie starts disappearing. And guess what? That doesn't just disappear. the same exact amount of money is still going to be raised. What ends up happening is all the other pieces of the pie have to make up for the difference. Okay. So this $2 million property owner, they're not going to have to pay quite as much. And I'm in favor of them not paying quite as much, but that $400,000 is a enormous piece of pie that gets now sprinkled across all of the other property owners. So what ends up happening is the burden ends up getting shifted to the lower income people disproportionately. This is what's called a regressive tax situation, regressive tax plan. And look, I think it's no secret. I'm on the conservative side of the fence, but I'm also on the side of the fence that says I do not care about my party as much as I do about what's right or wrong. I don't care, and I serve a higher calling than any kind of political party. And the deal is when you have the folks at the upper end getting a massive reduction like this, and it creates a burden for the folks at the lower end, that's just not right. It shouldn't be that way. So the good news is when you have I don't mean to get political right off the bat here. Let's see here. When you have these property tax rates, hold on. Dadgummit. Give me a second. I wanted to pull that tax rate. Anyway, when you have the tax rate, the exemptions being offered on a percentage basis, then it creates this kind of disparity. Okay. So what we've got to do is create the kind of situation where just like the mandatory exemptions have, we need to create a larger flat fee exemption where everybody gets the same amount of reduction. It doesn't matter. So here it is again. Oh, all right. So here it is. So the best thing that our taxing entities could do is, gosh, here's what we need to do. We need to petition our legislators to say, you got to fix this. You got to give our local taxing entities the ability to give a flat fee exemption instead of just a percentage. Right now, they don't have any choice. If our local taxing entity, let's say we've got people that are in office and they want to do everything they can to help people, then they should pass the biggest homestead exemption possible. That's what makes sense on the surface. But if they've got a city like the city of Fort Worth, where you have these ultra luxury homes and these ultra poverty homes, then what you're doing is you're just shifting the burden to the side of poverty, and they're having to pay. There is no tax exemption for low income. So we need this we need our local taxing entities to have the ability to give a exemption that is a flat fee. Now, here's the cool thing is if you that there is a minimum flat fee. So there's a minimum $5,000 exemption. So if you did 1%, then the minimum that they could knock off would be 1% or $5,000, whichever is greater. And so this would 1% homestead exemption would help people up to about a $5,000 home. Anyway, that's that. So I'm just showing you this because this is something that nobody else is going to talk about. In fact, our legislators are considering property tax bills that cap property values across the board. And hear me out. Tomorrow, we're going to talk with Tim Harden. He's so much more in tune with what's going on the legislative front. If this kind of stuff interests you, show up tomorrow and watch that live stream. This dude is going to go over this stuff in detail. And the tax consultants, by the way, understand this stuff. I don't agree with anybody 100% because nobody else that I know of is just rooting for the single family residential property owners. Some people are saying, hey, I just want to focus on the homestead people. I want to help them. Some people say all property owners need help. And I'm looking at it saying the single family residential property owners are getting hosed worse than anybody. That includes the people that have homesteads and the people that don't have homesteads. And I group all of those people together because here's the thing. If you have a property owner that it's not their homestead, they have renters in the property, then if their tax bill goes up, what do you think they're going to do? Just receive less profit? No, they're going to pass that cost along to the renters. So what ends up happening is the renters end up footing the bill. So and the issue at the core of it is how the properties are valued. Instead of the income approach, it's a sales comparison approach. meaning if somebody's paying an arm and a leg for a house near you, your tax bill is going up. It has nothing to do with your property individually, and it has nothing to do with your income level. And so all the single family residential property owners need as much help as they can get. I would support a property value cap on just those properties. But if a property value cap is applied to commercial properties, which is the current bill that the House is considering, if a property value cap is applied to commercial properties, the citizens here in Texas are going to be, can I say the word screwed? We're going to be screwed forever, and it's never going back. I promise you. We're going to be. That's the quickest way to turn Texas into California. And so we cannot pass a bill that has a property value cap on commercial properties, and it's just because of this issue. Is when you have the pie in general, and you start applying exemptions on a percentage basis, then the properties that are the highest value properties, they get the most taken off, and then the bill is foot by the lower income folks. So the commercial ends up winning like crazy, the residential ends up paying like crazy. And I hope that makes sense. I tried to make it as simple as I possibly could. This isn't something I talk about on a daily basis, but it's something that I understand and not enough people understand. So I just wanted to be able to explain this in a nutshell. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you guys understand what I just said, you got to help to spread the word on this, because nobody else is going to do it. All right, let me look and see what other problems we have. Then I'll read some comments and take a breath and take a drink, because I've been going kind of hard for a minute here. All right. Excuse me. Homestead exemptions. We talked about the differences between commercial and residential, how the undisclosed sales prices hurts residential and it helps commercial. We talked about how the commercial crowd sues the appraisal district. I can tell you in 2 days, I'm going to talk with you about how you can protest like Elon Musk. And by the way, it's basically a mechanism that allows us to do the same things that the commercial property owners are doing, but it's catered to single family residential owners. It makes it a little bit more affordable, and I'm going to teach you that. I talked about the income valuation method that commercial deals with versus the sales comparison valuation method that residential deals with, and how that creates disparities in the system. Let's see here. Here's another one. Another thing that really hurts the lower class folks. So lower property value folks. And here's the thing. I have trouble putting words to this, because it's not there. People that own lower property value properties, I don't view them as lower class citizens. I view them as people that own properties that are not as valuable, but the people themselves are equally valuable with the people that own the highest property values. And so I don't like the word lower class, because it seems like it has a diminishing air to it. And that's not the case. I believe that in our taxing system, as it relates to property taxes, every person should be treated uniform and equally. This is a situation where it doesn't happen. And I've talked about a number of ways that that's the case. But another way is this. First, I'm going to give you some information, then I'll give you the punchline. When the appraisal district starts valuing properties, they propose a value. Then we get the opportunity to disagree with that value, and the process is called protesting. We all kind of understand that. Then the appraisal review board goes in and they hear all the protests. They do all the protest hearings. And then, and by the way, if you want to settle with the appraisal district before you go to a hearing, you can do that. And in those situations, the person protesting might not ever go to a hearing, because they might get a value reduction before the hearing, or they might see that there's absolutely no chance at a hearing and it's pointless to go. So anyway, so all those hearings are concluded, and the entire valuation of all of the properties has to be certified by July 25th. Now, I misspoke a little bit. By July 25th, it's not 100% of property values have to be certified. Only 95% of all the property value has to be certified. Now, so what we're talking about here is the property value. It's not the number of accounts. So if you had, let's say, 10 accounts, 10 properties, to certify 90, well, let's say you'd have to probably take 20%. So if you had 20 properties to certify 95% of the value there, what if you had one property that was worth $10 million and then every other property, and then you had 19 other properties that were worth only $100,000. Well, guess what? All you would have to do to certify 95% of the value is to certify the $10 million property. Okay. Well, the appraisal district does the same methodology, the same strategy in trying to certify the values of all their properties. The properties, so what they do is, in order to achieve the 95% threshold, they order all of the protests in order from the most valuable properties on down to the least. So if you are a luxury property owner, then you're probably going to get your protest results before anybody else because your home is worth more. The people whose homes are worth less have to wait sometimes months to get their protest hearing. And it's just really messed up, because by the time all of the other protest hearings are gone and done with, you may not have had a hearing on your property if you've got a $80,000 house or a $100,000 house. It might take you months, and now all the public attention is gone. If there's something unfair that happens with your protest, good luck on getting any media attention on that. And then yeah, most properties are valued and certified before the taxing entities come up with their tax budgets, but it is definitely conceivable. And I've had properties I've dealt with where the value notice was, I'm sorry, not the value notice. The tax bill was calculated based on the proposed value. Then after the tax bill came out, we finally had our hearing, and it was just months after the valuation date. We had our hearing, and then they had to get a refund from the tax assessor. So they end up having to pay their tax bill based on the proposed value. And then once we corrected the value through the protest system, then they got a refund. So to me, that's a really messed up thing, where the order of the properties is by the most valuable, and it's in order down to the least valuable. And in fact, there's a law in the books right now that says that our veterans are supposed to get first in line. And I don't think that that's happening. So that's kind of messed up. Let me see if there are any other bullets that I need to touch before I answer questions and acknowledge some of the comments here. I will say this. Yeah, here are a couple very simple things that I've been talking for too long. Disenfranchise the lower property value people. I've helped with studies that have looked at the number of protests in certain areas, and we analyze the number of protests based on Hispanic and Latino surnames versus Anglo surnames. And the amount of protests for the Hispanic is way, way, way less than the Anglo. And we've thought about this quite a bit. Why is this the case? Well, I've got a number of theories on why, but one theory is that there aren't enough documents that are in Spanish. And there aren't enough people that are bilingual to hop in there and help. And typically these are going to be the lower property value homes. And so again, it's just another example of people on the lower socioeconomic end of the spectrum not getting the help that they really need. And then I'll mention probably the biggest issue, not the biggest. There's some enormous issues I'm not even touch on today, but one of the biggest issues is just this. When you've got a protest system where they actually make up definitions of words, they change the definition to terminology that me and you are accustomed to using on a daily basis, and then you bring somebody in that hasn't studied property tax, they can't afford to hire somebody to help them, and then they walk in the door using regular, normal language, and the appraisal district folks say, I'm sorry, that's not correct, you're not using the right words, then we don't stand a chance. And let me just show you really quick in a nutshell what I'm talking about. Right here is a term, I kind of am happy that they have it abbreviated. It's the total appraised value. The word appraised has nothing to do with an appraisal itself. It has nothing to do with an appraisal. It has to do. They should rename this the homestead capped value. When somebody walks into the appraisal district office and says, "Hey, I want to protest my appraised value," the staff will look. I don't have a whole lot of negative things to say about the staff. There's a couple bad apples, but they're a handful. There are a lot of people that go to work at the appraisal district that are working from the inside to try and help people. And if I ever go down there and you see me, I'm giving high fives and telling people thank you for doing a good job helping people, because there are a lot of property tax or homeowner advocates that work at the appraisal district. Now, but they're also bound by a pretty flawed set of rules, being our property tax code. If you walk in and say, I need to protest my appraised value, you may receive an answer that is, well, you can't protest your appraised value. You can only protest your market value. And that is technically true, but it's just because they've changed the definitions of the words. In the real world, when we talk about the appraised value of our home, we know that that's what our home is worth. In property tax land, that's not the case. Your home is worth the market value. That's what, we all know it's not accurate, but that's their terminology for it. It would be the market value. The appraised value has nothing to do with an appraisal at all. It's the homestead capped value. That's what it should be. And then let me give you a couple more examples. I got a good one. This will get a chuckle out of somebody, but they start making up terms for on the evidence that they use. And the evidence, what they'll do is they'll take here. Let me just get you this. It's worth the wait. Okay. They'll take issues. Hold on. I'll redo this for every different county that I do a talk in, and I get different evidence, and this is going to be the one. All right. So let me pull this over and show you this. So, okay. So you've got, here's a picture of my pie. So you've got this is what the evidence looks like that the appraisal district uses. Well, this evidence uses some terminology that is really messed up. Oh my gosh. Here we go. So they use terminology like, neighborhood. This is called the neighborhood code. Instead of using subdivisions, they use something called the neighborhood code. And so for this specific property, it's the neighborhood code is 4R003A. Well, that has nothing to do with the subdivision that it's in. That's some kind of arbitrary number or arbitrary value that they've figured out, where it might have what it is like, if there are too many small subdivisions and they don't have enough data out of those small subdivisions, then the appraisal district just draws their own border around a geographic area. It might include 5, 8 different subdivisions, and they call that the neighborhood code. It's a smart way to approach getting some kind of radius search, but what they should do instead is just do a half-mile radius around the property and then do some kind of calculation where they look at the year built, the lot size, the square footage, and get margins, tolerable margins, to say, as long as it fits within this padding of these margins, then we'll consider the property. Instead, they come up with the neighborhood code. So if you get your comps and you start ordering your comps according to the distance the distance of the sold property to the subject property, it could be a quarter of a mile away, but in a different neighborhood code. And the appraisal district might look at that and say, I'm sorry, that's not something that we're going to see as a valid, legitimate comp, because it's in a different neighborhood code. And you're sitting there thinking, well, what in the world does neighborhood code mean? This is terminology that's not used anywhere except for in the appraisal district. Doesn't make any sense at all. And there's not any real good information out there to teach people what this is, except for yours truly. So here's another thing. Oh man. So this one talks about the year built. I'm saying, oh man, because the example here doesn't clearly illustrate it. But what happens is, if your property was built in 1950, okay, and but somebody came in and did a significant rehab job on the property, and let's say in the year 2013, they remodeled the property, filed some permits. Well, guess what? The appraisal district watches which permits are filed, and then they'll update the year built to match the permits. So if you go down here, you look at the effective year. This one says the effective year is 1975. The year it was built is 1956. But what they'll do is instead of just focusing on properties that were built in the 1956 and it maybe had a permit filed in 1975, what they'll do is they'll say, okay, the effective year is 1975. So we're going to start comparing this 1975 property to properties that actually were built in 1975. Or let's say my example, if you had a house built in 1950, they remodeled it in 2013, then they'll start comparing that house built in 1950 to other houses built in 2013. And here's my problem with it is no matter what you do to something on the outside, it doesn't change what it actually is. And then this is where I get to show my slide of Madonna. Oh, poor Madonna. Anyway, no matter what you do to the outside, they're trying to Madonna our real estate. So there you go. That's my joke. But it's a bad joke. I feel bad for it. But there you go. All right. Let's take a deep breath. All right. So those are I said there were eight ways that the appraisal district system is messed up that nobody's talking about. The truth is there's a lot more than that. I just was like, I'm going to just steamroll through it all. I'm going to get through this and people can hopefully go out there and repeat this stuff and help spread the word a little bit on the areas that are not talked about quite so much, because our legislators are down in Austin right now writing laws based on the attention and of the public and the public pressure that they're receiving. And I need to commend our House of Representatives for being ambitious in the laws that they wanted to pass, because they were trying to do some significant change. I think that they were really sticking their neck out there, going out on a limb saying, hey, let's do property value caps for all property. It sounds good. I think that you're going to get a lot of people raising their hands saying, yeah, hooray, let's do that. But when you actually start doing the math and start looking at what's going to happen, it's catastrophic to regular folks, homeowners. And I hope that if you don't understand what I said about that section today, that's one that we really need to come back to and understand and help spread the word on. Here's the other thing. In California, a lot of people say, well, why don't we just set up our system like California? They have this thing called Proposition 13, where their tax values are basically capped out at the value that they purchased their home at. Well, that sounds great until you see all the problems that result from it. So I've heard that there's been a proposal for an amendment to carve out commercial properties, but last I did any homework on it, commercial properties were included in that. And so you would have a property that maybe somebody bought for $100,000 back in 1970. And then every year, the actual value of the property went up and up and up and up and up and up and up. So now you've got a property that's maybe worth, $20 million, or they bought it for $100,000. And what happens is if that property owner ever wants to sell that property, now they've got something really valuable being their tax value. There's so many millions of dollars of property value not getting taxed because it was locked in at their purchase price. So what ends up happening is the commercial property owners will figure out how to transfer ownership of that property without having a technical sale of the property. I don't know how they do it, but one idea off the top of my head is that maybe they would put that commercial property under the ownership of an LLC or something, some kind of entity. And then instead of selling the property, the entity would own that property and you just sell the interest in the entity. And so it keeps that tax value really low while all the residential homeowners are footing the bill, and it just creates problems. So anyway, there you go. All right, y'all. I could talk as fast as I can and go for almost an hour here, and I feel like I barely scratched the surface, but I do have to breathe at some point. So let's see what Sarah has to say. Keep spreading the truth. You got it, Sarah. Thanks for the support. Really appreciate you. Does age 70 stop taxes from going up? Debbie, you're in luck. I have a live property tax event scheduled just for you in 2 days. So I'm going to talk about the over 65 exemption. The answer is yes, kind of, but in order for me to really go into detail, I'd need a little bit more time. So I appreciate the applause, Jamie or Jaime, whichever one. It's probably Jamie. Need for speed, great information. Nobody else does this level of detail. As we've all become better informed on this process and understand the system, the more power we have. Yeah, you got it. And here's the thing. I realize it's just a fire hose of information, and I'm talking 10,000 miles an hour. And, I need to do more to create little videos with some animations and just get 1 or 2 points per video. But that takes time. And as long as I keep protesting for as many people and having to deal with all the baloney that's come with it, with people trying to run me out of this business and keep me from helping people, it just prevents me from doing the extra things like that to help spread the word. And so it's like, well, rather than just keep quiet, I'm going to come out. It's going to be fairly unpolished, but just authentic and raw, and give them the information like this. And, some people are going to understand it. And I've seen a difference. I've seen now when I walk into a room and I'm doing a seminar or whatever, and I ask for a show of hands on certain things, when I started this 7 years ago, there weren't that many people raising their hands that understood what I'm talking about. Now it's like half the room raises their hands and they understand what I'm talking about on a deeper level. I think that there are a lot of, so I don't know. The more we just keep spreading this information, the more we can, not be a victim to this. And I think that largely, I don't think that there's any grand conspiracy. One group, there are people making money off this system that don't want to see it change. And I've had people tell me to my face that they do not want to see property value caps or the uniform and equal lawsuits that the commercial property owners taking advantage of. I've had people tell me to my face that they have a vested interest in fighting tooth and nail to do everything they can to make sure those laws don't change. So from that angle, a little bit conspiratorial, but I'd say for the most part, our legislators and the people involved in the system it's just been kind of a Frankenstein system where it's like back in 1979 when appraisal districts were formed through the Pivotal Act. And since then, they've just kind of cobbled together little pieces of the property tax code since then. It wasn't really designed to work for a time where we have double-digit price appreciation in real estate values for, 5 years in a row or whatever it's been. So there we go. Let's see here what we got. We got Robert saying, I agree with you fully. I did arbitration. It was a total waste of money and appeared biased towards Tad. Well, Robert, there's nothing that's perfect. Everything is flawed. And I would just say all you can do is improve your odds. And I would say bravo to you for going through and doing the arbitration, because I think that you definitely tilted the odds in your favor by doing that. They do become much more negotiable moments before arbitration. And so good job. I hate that you didn't get a fair shake on this deal. It sucks, but we gotta fix this. I would suggest tune in tomorrow when Tim Harden comes. He's going to be talking about bigger picture stuff, how we can change the system once and for all, and some of the more nuances of the math behind this thing. And also, I'm going to push back on him just a bit and just get his take. In fact, I've been really wanting to have a conversation with him. He's been a wealth of information, a reliable source, and an advocate for property owners. And so I can't wait to ask him some questions and see, what he thinks about certain things that I'm talking about today. And we're just going to have that conversation in front of you guys. And so it just feels good to have people like him that are fighting on the same team and working together. So how can they tax a non-commercial property? Okay. So how can they tax? Okay. So I'll tell you, William, I got somebody on my YouTube page that's really wanting me to start talking about different stuff, about like how the government shouldn't have the ability to tax a non-commercial property. You're probably right that they shouldn't be able to do it, but they're doing it. And I think it's because of the use of the property. They're taxing the use, not necessarily the property. I don't know. All I know is this: they're doing it. And unless there's some kind of major revolt and some kind of system to replace the current system, they're going to keep doing it. And there's nothing we can do to stop it other than to continue to get informed. And I would just say, if you've got some insight to this, you should queue up the YouTube recorder and give a video on it, because I think that there's some interesting points there. It's just all over my head. And while I'm eyeball deep into protests, I'm just not going to have time to go and fight another battle. But I So I don't know the answer to your question, but that's as much of the understanding that I have on it. All right. How does this work for the tax incentives, all the high profile businesses like the Perot's Alliance area, Amazon warehouses, are they paying? To answer your question, look, I am not interested in this mantra of we need to tax the rich more. I don't understand why anybody would advocate for taxing the rich more. I could care less what the rich do. All I care about is, are the lower class people getting screwed? And they are. And so that's the problem we need to fix. And if we have to draw the lines different and it affects the rich people, well, then that's fine. It just has to be that way. Whatever right is right. Whatever is right is right. But I don't have a vendetta against anybody, except for maybe the politicians that don't have the backbone to stand up against their donors or whoever to make sure the lines are drawn in a fair place. That's the problem that I see. The property owners are going to do whatever's legal. And so if you don't like what they're doing, then we need to focus on the politicians to grow a backbone and stand up against a couple special interests, or one small group of people to help the masses. And so the ways that they're getting away with it are through the normal avenues of protesting commercial property, suing the appraisals, just like all the points that I've made in this video. The only other way I didn't really touch on was through the agricultural exemptions. There are businesses out there that will actually pay people to shuffle a small herd of cattle around on different properties and just to maintain an agricultural exemption. It's so screwed up. It shouldn't be illegal. It shouldn't be legal. We should have a way for, if you own property that's valuable, as long as our tax system is set up the way it is, you should have to pay property taxes on the property value that you own. And the system should be fair. And we need to make sure that the people that get the benefit are the lower people on the socioeconomic scale. Right now, it seems to me like if we do something to make the system more fair, that it seems like our state government just takes all the surplus and they stick it away in a rainy day fund or in their budget surplus, and they're not handing the money back to us. And I have a big problem with that. It's like, what now? Who's going to get the budget surplus? I know it's not going to be property taxes like they were promising. And tune in tomorrow for Tim Harden to explain more about that. But anyway, there you go. Good afternoon, Jeremy. How you doing? Luis, what's up, man? If you need a realtor in North Fort Worth, North Texas, this is the guy to call. He's great agent on our team. He is fantastic. Just holler at us and ask for Luis. Thanks for joining, Luis. JD Customs says, thank you for helping educate us. Cheers from Tom Green County. Man, Tom Green, I was so shocked at what was going on in Tom Green County. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. There's so many counties that are dealing with such difficult issues right now with property taxes and such unfair. Tom Green is getting hit hard, man. You got it. Trying to bring it to the surface. Rick, do you have legal reference on protecting sellers' disclosure of property sales? Do you have the legal reference on protecting? I would just say I do have a friend out in Midland who was really hammering the appraisal district out there. It's not going to do you much good. Let's see. The folks down in Travis County have made more headway on this than anybody. But I'll say this. The Texas Association of Realtors, meaning the Texas entity, like the Association of Realtors is set up where you have the local boards, then the state boards, and then the national board. Well, on the local level, they're coughing up the data, but on the state level, the state level has made an agreement with the comptroller to share this information. As long as it's legal, here I go again. I'm putting it at the feet of the politicians. I cannot blame the Association of Realtors for doing this. Like, they're not the bad guys. As long as it's legal, then why wouldn't they do it? We need our politicians to grow a backbone and say, you know what? I appreciate all the lobbying money that you're spending to keep these rules alive, because I know you're making money off this stuff. But what you need to do is take your lobbying money and shove it, because people are getting screwed because of this. And our laws on the books are getting circumnavigated by disclosing sales prices of everybody. Or we need to just do away with it and make it legal for them to give the values to the appraisal districts. I don't really have a dog in this fight, except for the incongruency of the law here. It's not right, and the people should have a say in it. So I don't have if you just Google non-disclosure state sales price Texas, you can start going down that bunny trail. All right, Robert, what are you saying here? Why can't schools be financed through states? I think this is a great question. And in fact, I think Tim Harden's going to probably shed some light on this tomorrow. If it was pure sales tax, then our sales tax burden would end up being too much money. But I think that there are different taxes. I've heard a consumption tax, which is kind of like a sales tax, but there's other forms of consumption that don't really get taxed. And so if you were to spread it out far enough, then maybe you could generate enough revenue and spread out the burden so no one group is getting hit very hard. But if it was through a sales tax alone, the taxes that are already been generated, it would be too much. It would be unsustainable. It's not feasible. So that's the reason I haven't bought into that kind of idea yet. But I would also say this. This is a counterpoint. What happens to our schools when we give up the power of the funding to the state entirely? You know, when we have to write the check for our property taxes, and we can see, you know, South Lake Carroll ISD or Northwest ISD or Fort Worth ISD is the recipient of our funds that we're writing the check for. There's some amount of accountability and interest in local control that goes into that. What happens when, you know, that's released and gone back to the state? I don't know. I don't know. These things, again, it's so much easier to get a consensus on the problems than it is to find common ground on the solutions. The guy tomorrow is going to have a much more educated opinion about all this stuff. And so these are some of the questions that I would recommend you bring and ask tomorrow, and have Tim talk about, because I think that this is a good question and it may be a feasible answer. These are the people operating within their means. They're people operating. Probably right, Rick. I forget, you're probably commenting on something I said a long time ago. Thank you, Mela, for sharing this. Sarah, keep up the great work. These videos are great, informative, and timely, which is, you got it, Sarah. Thank you so much for your support. Excellent info. You got it. Robert says again, I've had almost derelict house next to me that's uninhabitable. Tad has never accepted that as a reason to lower my value. Here's the reason why, Robert. Probably because the appraisal district is probably going to use 6 properties to justify the value of yours. That property is only 1 out of the 6. Now, where you might, so what they're going to do is they're going to say, hey, yeah, we know that property next door is kind of an eyesore. It's a blight on the community, but we've got these other properties that support a value much higher. Nothing we can do about the property next door. What I would do is maybe bring in some kind of news article that talks about how a junked out property next door would affect the value. And then you're going to have to make the case that, that the other 6 sales are not adjacent to that same property. If they are adjacent to that, if you've got one sale that's somebody purchased at a sky high value, and it's adjacent to that blighted property, then the argument's totally gone. But I would say that's probably the reason why. I might even bring in news article, any kind of statistics, kind of get outside the box on your evidence. You may have a little bit more luck, but it's a tough one to deal with. All right, here we go. What action was taken that gave the state the authority to tax non-commercial private property such as, you got me, William. I think Google's going to be your friend on that one. I have no idea, man. I've got a full plate helping people in this stuff, trying to answer questions and help people for the here and now, while folks like you are out there fighting the bigger battle. You know what? This again is probably a much better question for Tim Harden. He's looking at things from a much higher level than I am. I'm looking at things on the level of, I kind of start at this point of, how can I help people right here, right now, directly? How can I help you and me in this screwed up system? Then that has led me to the next step down the path of, how is the system screwed up and how can we fix it? And so it's not until you get several steps down the path do you get to, is this taxation system even legal and constitutional? By the time I get to that question, I'm so busy helping people that it's like, it's just, I'm putting out too many fires as it is. So I'm just trying my hardest. All right. But William, come tomorrow and ask Tim the same exact question. He'll probably have an answer for you. All right. Robert, you got it, man. David says something. Let's see here. This is David's got 3 messages, I think, kind of strung together, and I'm not able to see the whole thing. Let's see here. What's this say? Problem with asking our reps to pass an option for local appraisal authorities to go with a flat rate versus is that the city counties may be lobbying the state. I don't think, here's the problem, David. You might be right, but I have a feeling more than anything, the level of information that the average citizen has about this is about the same level that our local tax or our local elected officials have, and our legislative officials. They don't know anything about this. I promise you, the amount of people that have actually done the math to understand how this hurts homeowners is so few. Nobody said these ideas out loud before, not on this level at least. So maybe that's true, but I don't think so. I think that largely our local elected officials remain ignorant of this whole thing, and they're depending on staff recommendations to tell them how to vote on certain issues, and nobody's giving recommendations on this stuff except for me. So, yeah. You do have this other side of it where the actual source of demand for this are the budgets for our local taxing entities. And you definitely have people like, I've heard, I don't know much about them, but the Texas Municipal League, where and I don't know if that's really the entity, but there you have entities, lobbying groups that are actively taking our tax dollars and lobbying against us. And that kind of thing is happening. And I know that it's been a hot button issue for our legislature to address is taxpayer funded lobbying. So that is a thing. I just don't think that for this specific issue, they're probably not focused on it. They're probably focused on that for budgetary items, which is it's almost more important, because if our local taxing entities didn't spend any money, guess what? We wouldn't have any taxes. But that's not realistic. And nobody wants our schools to just go to trash. Nobody wants our cities to go to trash. We just don't want the money being wasted, and we want those budgets to be in check. And we definitely don't want organizations that stand to receive that money to be lobbying against us. All right, I've got to wrap this up pretty soon. The questions keep coming. Looking forward to Tim coming tomorrow. That's my brother-in-law. Oh, how about that? Very cool. It's crazy. I was standing in a room talking, and I'm talking trash about 3 or 4 different kinds of people, stuff I'm not willing to do as much on here. And then I throw out Tim's name, and his father-in-law happens to be in the audience, and he's like, "Hey, that's my son-in-law." I'm like, "Well, thank God he was one of the people I was talking positively about." But he's out there doing really good work. So you got good family there. If we filled at your stuff, the website, are we good with our protest? No, you don't. You're good. If I'm protesting for you, then you don't need to file anything at the appraisal district. We file everything for you. Now, if you wanted to go above and beyond and take some photos of property condition issues and get some repair estimates, then you can do that. Here's the sad thing. I don't say this a whole lot. I usually just encourage people to do it because it's true. You get more attention if you have a little bit more evidence. But here's the thing. If you just take photos of some property condition issues and you don't take the time to assign a dollar amount of value to those condition issues, then you're leaving it up to the appraisal district to come up with their own value for that crack in the wall or that foundation problem. And I promise you, it's not going to work in your favor. And still, you might have a property that is already being valued lower than what the evidence supports. And with your repair estimates, you might be able to get them down from that evidence supported number. But if you don't get them all the way down past what they've proposed, then it's not going to do any good. So you don't need to stress over it. I think this year, more than any other year, the comps are going to be the thing that are going to show us the greatest bang for our buck, because property values increased by 15% and then decreased by about 11% from January 1st last year to January 1st this year. And so we're seeing a lot of properties overvalued just because of the comps. And so that's where I'm really focused. All right, last comment. Probably high. School taxes are very high. I don't have a son. Yep. So here's a common thing that a lot of people talk about. If I don't have kids in school, why am I paying school tax? Well, this is a problem. I say a problem. This is a dynamic that comes from any socially socialized program. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. It's just a fact of life. If you have some kind of socialized program, whether it's Social Security or our public school system or socialized healthcare, whatever it is, then if you just cause the people that are going to receive that value to be the only people paying taxes, then it would be unaffordable. You have to spread that burden around and get everybody to pay into the system, or else you can provide the benefit. And the justification is, well, our society stands to gain the more educated our citizens are, and so it's a societal benefit. Therefore, everybody has to pay in. I think that we need to do some. I think there's a real civil rights argument. Oh gosh, I was about to tiptoe into some other political hot button issues. I'm going to not. But I would just say this: like the same argument goes for people that say, "Hey, I'm not drawing Social Security and I don't plan on it. Why do I have to pay into the system?" Well, we all kind of understand we're all going to benefit from that, so we all need to pay in. But it's unsustainable. If we all didn't pay in, then it'd be a problem. Homeschool parents have the same questions. The same thing goes with the healthcare. It's got to be universal in order for it to be affordable. So you either, whether it's right or wrong or good or bad is a different topic. But there you have it. All right, y'all, an hour and 20 minutes. Whew. All right, I've got 2 more days of this. Tomorrow, we're talking with Tim Harden. Tune in tomorrow. He's going to be talking about if our legislature is lying to us, what's the current status? Are we going to see a solution to this ever, or are we just saddled with horrible property taxes? What it would take to solve the problem. And he's going to be dispelling the lies and the agendas going on behind the scenes. This guy is sharp as a tack, and I'm going to be very curious about what he has to say, and I'm going to be talking to him and just having a conversation in front of you guys. And bring your questions. He is a wealth of information, and you're going to hear stuff from him that you won't hear from anybody else, including me, because he does his homework, and he's a sharp dude. All right, over now. Have a great day.